In this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this adorable Blippi cake. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. If you want to skip the intro and get right into the video, there are chapters linked below. So this week, again, I have one cake. And it's the slow time of year, so this is the cake that I decided to film for you because I didn't have a choice. And I am doing this Blippi cake design, which actually is not my original design idea. I was given a picture of this amazing cake by Kakes. By Fabricake. I didn't want to get it wrong. I just looked at the watermark on the picture. And she asked me to do something very similar to this. So what I want to let you know is that I already have my cakes baked, filled, iced, and they are in the refrigerator waiting to be decorated. And I have videos showing you how I bake, fill, ice, refrigerate, cakes. All of that will be linked in the description. And before we get started, I just want to let you know that I am now available for personal one-on-one phone calls or Zoom calls. If you have any questions or if you need any cake advice, I would love to talk to you. The information for that is linked below. So let's get started. I have a piece of non-slip pad underneath my cutting board so it doesn't slide around, a wet paper towel that I can keep wiping my X-Acto knife on, a Dresden tool, and a little bit of water, and I hurt my thumb. I have a Band-Aid on it, so I just put this glove on top of it so the Band-Aid wasn't touching anything. So I printed these out the size that I need them to be. These pictures will be linked below, and I'm changing some of the colors in there. I rolled out this red fondant, medium thickness, and all of my fondant has this Gum-Tex powder, Tylose powder mixed into it. It's going to help your fondant set hard and be so much easier to work with. That will be linked below. So now I'm going to do my trace, cut, and smooth method. Let's put this on top and trace this. Now I'm looking beyond the wheel and I'm doing that yellow part and the red part. I'm just going to do that all red. So I don't always do the same exact color that the picture is. It's just whatever mood that I'm in. So you want to press hard enough that you are tracing that line onto the fondant, but not too hard where you poke a hole in through the paper. And then I just want to mark where the handle is and that little accent. And I'm just using my Dresden tool to deepen the lines, and let's cut this out. And I just want to use my tool to deepen the details in here. And anytime I cut anything out of fondant, I take my time to smooth my cuts. I'm running my fingers over it, using my tools to press the fondant back down on itself to smooth everything out. You might not see me do that every time, but I do it every time. Now let's do the same thing. I have this yellow fondant rolled out a little thicker, and I decided I wanted to make this blue piece yellow. So I am just tracing that onto the fondant, and then deepening those accent lines, and then let's cut it out, smooth my cuts. And you can see how that fits together. Perfect. Now I'm using this little circle cutter. It's about the same size as the wheels in the picture. And I'm cutting pieces off of the red so the wheels can stick in there. You see what I just did? And now I have this little piping tip, getting a little water behind that and sticking those down. And anywhere that this fondant is going to touch each other, I'm just getting a little bit of water so I could stick it together so it will stick together. Perfect. Now I want to do the same thing for the window, trace, cut, and smooth. And get a little bit of water behind it and stick that down. And for the orange, the wheel covers, I'm doing the same thing. So you see the pattern here. I just trace it onto the fondant, cut it out, smooth my cuts, and then piece it together. Nice, and now I want to do the same thing for the dirt in the back, and I'm tracing this onto brown fondant. And that looks good, so I'm going to realign it on the picture, and let's set that aside. Now I'm going to do the same exact technique for this other, what is it, a crane truck or something? I don't know, but tracing it onto the fondant, cutting it out, smoothing my cuts, and then piecing it together. Now for this orange piece, I see again, I'm looking past the wheels, past that gray part, and I'm tracing what I feel like the orange piece looks like underneath it, right? Because I want it to be one entire piece, and then I'll cut the wheels out. You'll see what I do. And that one looks a little too big. That looks like the perfect size. So I'm just trying to see where the wheels are in relation to the piece, right? So I cut the pieces out, and then I'm cutting black wheels out, get a little bit of water down where it meets the other fondant so it can stick. And just tracing these little pieces are kind of a pain in the butt, but doing the same technique for the whole thing. And then for these little orange dots, I have like a tip number 6 or something like that, and just trying to make it look like the picture. And I don't want to forget the gray accent pieces as well. And that looks good. Let's realign that on the picture and set that aside. Now I want to make the number topper. I printed this out the size that I want it to be. I have videos showing you how I make number toppers, and I will link that below. But again, I'm tracing this 3 onto thinner black fondant. It does have the Tylose powder mixed into it. And then I'm cutting it out, smooth my cuts. And then I want to get a little bit of water on the back, flip it over and put it on top of this piece of orange fondant. This piece is rolled out about 1/4 of an inch thick, and whenever I cut into thicker fondant, I'm going to make a shallow cut first. So I'm just sticking the tip of the X-Acto knife in there just to create a line that I can use as a guide when I'm cutting the whole thing out. So once I have the shallow cut, then I stick the tip all the way down to the board and cut it out. These inner pieces here, do you see how I'm using the tip and then I'm peeling the fondant in? So I don't want to mess up the number, so I'm trying to just pull that fondant away from the piece. You see what I'm doing? So I'm trying to just peel it away, because those little crevices get a little bit difficult to work with, so you have to work in little spurts. So I'm going to smooth my cuts, use my tools. And then I'm just going to cut the rest of this out. See how I'm using that line as a guide so it's not messing up the fondant? Perfect. Then I flip it over, use my tools and my fingers to smooth the edges, and then I'm going to flip it over on the front and do the same thing. Now I have a wet skewer here. I want to twist this in here. I'm not going to jab it in because I don't want to. Why to go so slow like that? So do you see, if I put it right in the middle, you're going to be able to see it. So I got to shift it to the right a little bit. I'm sticking it directly in the center, and I'm screwing this in here, flip it over, make sure it's not poking out the front or the back. So you have to hold it parallel to the cutting board. And now I just want to make the little road lines. So I have this strip cutter. This will be linked below, and I'm cutting white fondant strips, and then I'm cutting them into smaller pieces. You see what I'm doing here? And then I'm cutting those pieces in half. And then I'm just laying these out first on the number to see where I want them to be. And then I'll get a little bit of water behind each one and put that down. Now I want to put them down with a little bit of a curve to them, since the 3 has a curve. I don't want them to be all straight because that would look a little weird. So I'm just manipulating them, whatever, just getting them into the right place. And that looks good. Let's set that aside. Now I want to make the name look like the logo, and you can see how it's kind of yellow in the middle and orangey red on the edges. This font that I printed his name out in is called Omni Black, but the edges aren't round. So when I trace this, I want to round the edges a little bit. I couldn't find what font that is. So I have this yellow fondant rolled out really thin. It does have the Tylose powder mixed into it, and I'm going to do the same thing. Trace it on here, cut it out, smooth my cuts. I do have a video showing you in full detail how I make fondant names, and I will link that in the description. And like I always say, you always want to cut the center of the letters first, smooth that out, and then cut the rest of the letter out. Just trust me, it's so much easier when you do it that way. Now I have a little bit of shortening, and I'm going to get some shortening behind each letter and stick it down to the paper. I don't want these letters moving around as I'm spraying them with the airbrush gun. I have some orange airbrush coloring. I will link my airbrush gun below. And you see the center of the letters, the middle of the name is kind of yellow, and it gets deeper as it goes out to the edges. So I'm just trying to make it look kind of like that. And then I want to deepen the outside letters, so I got a little bit of red in there as well and sprayed that down. And I want to set this aside to dry before I put it on the background. So it was probably about 20 minutes, let it dry, and then I have this thin blue fondant, line it up. And then I want to cut an even blue border around the whole thing. Excuse my big head, but I just want to make sure that it's even the whole way around. And then flip it over, and I like to smooth all my letters from the back and then from the front as well. And I'm setting this aside on a cake dummy, the size of the cake it's going on, to dry. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the cone. And I always say, are you guys getting bored? It's the same thing for all of the decorations. So I'm doing 3 cones, trace it onto this fondant that's rolled out like a medium thickness, and then cut it out and smooth my cuts. Now I have this ribbon cutter. I will link it below, and I'm just going to cut a few ribbons out and get a little bit of water on the back. And there's 2 stripes on these cones, so I'm doing 1 lower and 1 higher, and then wrapping it around the back where it meets in the back, cut it so that a seam forms. And I do that for all 3 of the cones. And now just a little tip here. I noticed that these cracked a little bit, this white fondant, so I'm just getting a little bit of white icing and patching those cracks because I did not feel like redoing that. Let's set those aside. Now I have these edible images that I printed out. I have a video showing you how I work with edible images and where I get my edible image supplies. That will all be linked in the description. So I'm cutting these out, and with this guy, I'm cutting a thin white border around the entire piece. Now I have some thicker white fondant on here and some piping gel. I flip these upside down on a paper towel, and I am painting piping gel all the way on these back pieces, all the way to the edges. Flip that over onto the white fondant and do that for the other 2 signs as well. And now I'm just cutting these out, smoothing my cuts. Now I rolled this fondant out a little thicker because I want to get skewers behind it. You will see what I mean. And now, like I did before, I'm flipping him over and just smoothing those cuts from the back. And I want to put lollipop sticks in the bottom of these 2 road signs, but I need to poke a hole in there first with a skewer since the skewer is sharper. And then I'm doing the same thing that I did with the number, just screwing a skewer in the bottom. And then where that hole is, I'm sticking that lollipop stick in the bottom. And I did wet the stick, that way it sticks to the fondant. And let's set those aside. Now I want to stack this cake. I just got it out of the fridge using my ruler to measure the straws, and I have a stacking tutorial that goes into complete detail on how I stack cakes. That will be linked in the description. All of these tools that I'm using right now will also be linked down there. So I'm making sure it's level, get some buttercream down, and my hands are clean whenever I touch these cakes, and I'm stacking the next tier on. Make sure it's level, repeat the process. So I'm measuring for the straws, cut the straws, put them in, get some buttercream down. And again, this is all covered in that stacking tutorial. Dowel the cake and then just fill in that void with some buttercream icing. Perfect. Let's set that back in the fridge. Now I want to roll out the grass border, so I'm rolling green fondant into a log, flattening it, get a little cornstarch down, roll it tall before I roll it really long. And then I want to use my fondant smoother to smooth out any air bubbles that might be in there and cut a straight edge on the bottom. And then I'm just doing like wavy hills on the top. And let's flip that around so the top of the hills are facing me. I have some green airbrush coloring, and I'm just going to airbrush the top of the hills just to give it a little dimension. If you don't have an airbrush gun, you can always use some petal dust if you'd like. Or you can skip this step. and I want to leave that dry before I wrap it on the cake. So in the meantime, I'm going to make these clouds. This fondant is rolled out a medium thickness, and do you see how I'm just doing little wavy lines? Clouds are super simple to make, so it just depends on how wide and how tall you want them to be. Just cut the wavy lines, smooth your cuts, and let's set those aside. Getting the cake out of the fridge, and I want to take a wet paper towel and clean the cake board. And I'm getting some piping gel down on the middle tier. This is where that grass border is going to go, starting in the back. And let's wrap this around the cake. Where it meets in the back, I'm cutting the excess off and then pushing the seam together. And now I want to see where these trucks are going to go. That looks pretty good. So I'm getting a little bit of icing in the middle, piping gel around the perimeter. I always use icing or piping gel or a combo of both to stick my pieces to my cakes. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. Just this time I'm just using some piping gel to stick that down. And let's put the clouds down. So piping gel behind that, you can use icing, you can use water. I always go between like different mediums to use things to stick to cakes. Now I'm getting a little bit of piping gel behind the name and sticking that on the bottom tier, making sure it's center. I have this ribbon cutter. I want to make sure I'm cutting these wide enough so the buttons fit on here, and putting that between two rulers and just doing a stitching detail on the edges of the ribbons. And I'm getting some Crisco in here, and I want to make sure that I don't distort these buttons, so I'm figuring out how much fondant I need. Roll it out, flatten it out, and then press it in there. That way nothing is going to get distorted, and then just peel it back. Easy to do since I put that shortening in there. And now let's put this on the cake. So I'm doing the little button detail up the middle and using these angled scissors to cut. And then I'm doing the orange suspenders on one side and then measuring the distance and making sure that I have the same distance on the other side. And that wasn't right, so let me pull it out just a little bit more. And that looks good. So let me cut the excess off, and I'm rolling out orange fondant really thin. I'm going to make the bow tie. I make bows really weird. Just bear with me. So I'm cutting two pieces, and then I put the flat pieces together, right? And then cut the one side, go up in the center and down on both sides. And at the bottom, I'm doing a little curve, right? So I have videos showing you how I do this. I'll link it below, but I'm just making sure that these are the correct size, and then get a little bit of water on the edges, stick it together, and then fold it up and down. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, stick it together, fold it up and down. Perfect. Where it meets in the middle, I'm cutting the excess off, get a little bit of water in the middle, and then I can press these together. And to get the piece in the middle, I'm going to cut a strip that's a little too long, so let's cut it off. And I'm folding the edges down just for a cleaner look. And I'm going to flip it over. Oh, a little too long. Let's cut that. Flip it over, get water underneath where those folds are so they stay down, and then get water in the whole thing. Place the bow on top, wrap it around, and then tuck it behind in the back. And there's your bow. Super simple. Now going back to the cake, I'm angling a toothpick down into the cake so the bow doesn't fall off. Get some icing in the middle and piping gel on the ends. And I'm going to stick this bow down. And I want to use like this little palette knife so I can press it into the correct shape. And I want to get the buttons. So I'm doing one on top, one on the bottom, and then I'm going to do one in the middle so they're equally distant. And just fixing that bow. Nice. Now I have these Oreo cookies that I chopped up in a food processor, and I'm getting some piping gel around the perimeter of the top and the bottom tier. Get a teeny tiny spoon. I don't want this to go all over the place, and just putting this little Oreo dirt border around those tiers. I'm cutting a ribbon to size, getting some glue around the board and on the back of the ribbon, and then just pressing that together. And let's set that back in the fridge overnight. And now I'm going to finish this cake. So I got it out of the fridge. I'm putting one toothpick on either side of the skewer. That way when this is in the top of the cake, it's not going to twist. It's just going to stay in place. I'm doing the same thing for the number. And I put these down in the top tier. And then, you know what? I don't like the 3 back there. So let me take that out and put it in front of the guy. So I'm just figuring out where I like these the best. And where should I put that sign? I don't like that there. I don't like that there. That looks pretty good there. So let's stick that down there and then stick this other one on the other side. And I'm just getting toothpicks in the bottom of the cones. And again, I'm trying to figure out where I like this to be. So I'm going to put that there, and I was like, wait, I don't like that there. So where should I put this? I'll stick it down there. And this is how I put my cakes together. I'm like, okay, that looks good. And then I was like, maybe I do like that cone on the top, so I just put it back. And then I found where the other one's going to go. I'm going to stick that in the side of the cake. So I'm putting the toothpick in the side and sticking it into the cake. And now for the final touch, let's get some piping gel on the very top. And I'm going to put some more of that Oreo dirt on the top tier. And there is the cake. How cute. So there you go. How adorable is this? I just love how it turned out. And all of the pictures and everything that I used to make this will be linked in the description. Now this cake is 4-inch, 6-inch, and the bottom tier is a 1-layer 8-inch cake that I torted into 2 thinner layers. So I like to play with different heights of tiers, and I have a video talking about that, and I will link that in the description. But this cake feeds about 30 people or so. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you guys learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you are enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is pinned in the comments below. And I'd love for you to keep in touch on social media and check out my website. Everything is listed in the description. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.